The mountains around Crans, Montana hold their breath in winter. Snow muffles everything. On the night of December 31st, 2025, that silence was about to be shattered in ways no one could have imagined. Crans, Montana sits high in the Swiss Alps, carved into the sullen face of the Valais Canton, a place designed for pleasure, ski runs descending from peaks that scrape nearly 10,000 feet. The wealthy come here, tourists, families, young people seeking that particular alpine magic where snow and luxury intersect. Les Constellations had stood on the main street for more than 40 years, a two-level establishment. During the day, a cafe where locals gathered over coffee and conversation. At night, something more. The basement transformed into a space where music pulsed through walls thick with decades of celebration, where bodies moved in the half-dark beneath low ceilings. Young people loved it. No cover charge, no velvet ropes or bouncers checking lists, no pretense, just a place to be, a place that felt like it belonged to them. The venue could hold 300 people. The entrance opened onto a covered terrace, then the ground floor bar where bottles lined mirrored shelves, and finally down a narrow staircase worn smooth by countless feet, the basement. That subterranean room was where the real party happened, where DJ equipment glowed in corners and speakers mounted on walls sent bass through concrete floors, where the acoustic foam on the ceiling absorbed sound, keeping it trapped inside those walls so the residential building above could sleep. Dark material, probably polyurethane, pressed into that egg carton pattern designed to catch and dampen noise. Practical, inexpensive, effective. No one thought much about what else it might do. No one considered that sound-dampening material and fire-resistant material aren't necessarily the same thing. On New Year's Eve, Les Constellations filled early. Swiss locals who'd celebrated there for years, French tourists who'd crossed the border seeking alpine charm, Italian families on ski holidays, their children finally old enough to stay out past midnight, teenagers dressed in their best, feeling adult and free, 20-somethings who'd planned this night for weeks, a few parents letting their children celebrate with friends, trusting the familiar venue. The energy was electric, that particular buzz that only comes on the last night of the year when everything feels possible and the weight of what came before is about to lift. By 1:30 in the morning, the basement was packed. 300 people, maybe more, pressed together in a space designed to hold them but barely. Champagne bottles circulated, passed from hand to hand. And some carried sparklers, those thin metal rods topped with compressed powder that burns with cascading silver fire, throwing off tiny stars of light, the kind you see on birthday cakes or stuck into fancy desserts at restaurants. Festive, celebratory, beautiful, harmless, or so everyone thought. No one had read the warning labels. No one knew they burned at temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees. No one considered what happens when something that hot comes close to something flammable. A bartender hoisted a waitress onto his shoulders. She was young, laughing, holding one of these bottles high above the crowd, the sparkler fizzing and spitting light in cascading silver streaks. The crowd cheered. Phones came out to capture the moment. Raised arms, bright flames against darkness. Someone's Instagram story, someone's last happy memory. The new year barely an hour old, and this was how they'd remember it, except they wouldn't remember it this way, not anymore. But the ceiling was low, lower than most people realized until they looked up, maybe 7 feet, less in some places where support beams ran across, and those sparklers extended another foot, maybe more, above the bottle. Inches separated those flames from the acoustic foam. Witnesses would later describe seeing the sparkler come so close they held their breath. And polyurethane foam, the cheap industrial kind, burns at around 12,000 BTUs per pound. Wood, by comparison, burns at roughly 8,500. The foam doesn't just catch fire, it liquefies and ignites simultaneously, releasing energy in concentrated bursts. It devours oxygen and releases it as superheated gas and thick black smoke, laced with hydrogen cyanide and carbon monoxide, invisible poisons that work faster than flame. The sparkler touched the ceiling. What happened next unfolded with terrifying speed. Survivors described it as instantaneous. One moment, celebration. The next, flames spreading across the ceiling like liquid. The technical term is flashover, one of the most feared phenomena in fire science. In an enclosed space, heat rises and collects at the ceiling. Smoke builds. Flammable gases are released through pyrolysis. When temperature reaches between 500 and 600 degrees Celsius, everything changes. Every combustible surface reaches its ignition point simultaneously. The room doesn't catch fire, the room becomes fire. In Les Constellation's basement, this happened in 10 seconds or less. The foam ignited, the wooden ceiling caught, the decorations, furniture, the air itself seemed to explode. Heat and pressure built so rapidly that temperatures climbed past 1,000 degrees within moments. People didn't have time to understand what was happening. 1 second, they were dancing, celebrating, taking photos, kissing strangers at midnight. The next, the world was orange and black and unbearably hot. The smoke came first, thick and choking, filling lungs with poison before flames ever touched skin. Burning polyurethane releases cyanide gas. A single breath can incapacitate. 2 or 3 more can kill. People started coughing, gasping, reaching for throats that suddenly wouldn't work. Not the panic you see in movies, where everyone screams and runs in slow motion. Real panic, the kind where rational thought stops and instinct takes over, where the only thought is get out, get out, get out. People surged toward the stairs, the only exit most knew, the one they'd come down an hour ago, laughing and buzzed on champagne. A narrow staircase, maybe 3 feet wide, a small door at the top, a bottleneck that became a death trap within seconds. Bodies piled on the stairs. People fell and couldn't get up because others fell on top of them, and more on top of those. The weight of human beings pressed together with the force of pure terror. Some were already burning, their clothes and hair ignited by the heat that filled the air like water fills a drowning person's lungs. Others crushed, ribs breaking under the pressure of people who didn't mean to kill but couldn't stop their own desperate forward motion. Witnesses who made it out described climbing over people, stepping on friends and strangers, feeling bones give way beneath their feet, desperate to reach air that didn't burn. The sounds they remembered most weren't the screams. It was the silence underneath, the people who'd stopped making noise. A few found the emergency exit. There was one, required by code, tucked somewhere along a sidewall. But in that smoke, in that overwhelming darkness where visibility dropped to 0 within heartbeats, most never saw it. The smoke wasn't like fog, it was opaque, solid, like being sealed inside a black box with no light source anywhere. When flashover occurs, you can't see your hand in front of your face, you can't see the person next to you, you can only feel the heat, feel other bodies pressing. Feel your way along walls that are getting hotter by the second. People went where they could feel others going, toward the main stairs, toward the terrible crush of bodies and flame. Outside, survivors stumbled into the cold mountain air, some on fire, others so badly burned their skin hung in sheets. Many couldn't breathe, lungs seared by superheated air. The fire burned so hot that ceiling sections collapsed, dropping burning debris onto the stairs. 16-year-old Axel Clavier stood outside, shaking. He'd made it out. One friend was dead, 2 or 3 missing. He told reporters he kept seeing the images. People burned so badly you couldn't recognize them. He said he thought he'd be traumatized for life. The final count took days. Around 40 dead, most of them young, some children. 119 injured, many critically, burns covering bodies, lungs destroyed. Among the dead was Emanuele Galoppini, a young Italian golfer. Pierre Prolong gave a televised appeal for information about his granddaughter Emily, 22. She'd gone to La Constellation with friends. No one had heard from her since. Hospitals filled rapidly. Helicopters ferried victims across Switzerland and into Italy. Geneva doctors described treating flashover injuries, severe burns on exposed areas, face, neck, upper limbs, most patients between 15 and 30 years old. La Constellation had undergone regular fire inspections. The municipality confirmed annual or biannual checks. Yet the venue had 300-person capacity, a single staircase, and a ceiling covered in flammable foam. Classified as a lounge, not a nightclub, it fell under less stringent regulations. No multiple exits required, no sprinkler system. Local residents weren't surprised. The bar had a reputation for lax standards. One local said he was surprised it took so long for something to happen. The investigation focused on whether safety standards were met, whether the acoustic foam was approved for that setting, whether sparklers should have been permitted. Attorney General Beatrice Pilot stated everything pointed to sparklers in champagne bottles coming too close to the ceiling. The investigation continues. The psychological weight of New Year's Eve deepens this tragedy, a night heavy with symbolism, endings and beginnings, when we're supposed to leave behind what hurt us and embrace what might heal us. New Year's Eve is about hope, about light conquering darkness, and in that basement, all of that hope turned to ash in seconds. Switzerland went into mourning, flags at half-mast, a national day of mourning declared. Memorials appeared outside La Constellation, flowers, candles, teddy bears. But perhaps the most haunting aspect is the waiting. Families who still don't know, who watch their phones, who sit beside burn victims so damaged that identification requires DNA testing. And the survivors carry their own burden. 16-year-old Axel's fear of lifelong trauma isn't unfounded. Survivors' guilt is real and terrible. Why did I make it when they didn't? These questions circle endlessly in minds of people for whom luck became the only thing that mattered. The mountains around Crans, Montana are silent again. Snow continues to fall. But in that town, on that street, the building stands sealed, and in hospitals, burn victims lie in induced comas, their families holding gauze-wrapped hands, whispering words of hope or farewell. The new year arrived in Crans, Montana with fire and screaming, and the bitter understanding that midnight is just a number on a clock, that celebration and catastrophe can occupy the same breath, that sometimes when we gather to chase away darkness with light, we discover that darkness was waiting all along. If you found this story affecting, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe. There are more stories like this one, stories about moments when everything changes, when we're reminded that the line between safety and disaster is thinner than we want to believe. Until next time, stay safe, and remember that every threshold we cross carries weight, even the ones we think we understand.